I debated sharing this since, unfortunately, I have zero remaining evidence. I was told that there was no way of saving the video since the CCTV system only kept the recordings for the past 48 hours. Even if it were recoverable, this happened nearly 10 years ago and the thrift store in question closed this year. So it's lost to time, unfortunately. I had actually forgotten all about this for years. When I was 17, I got a job working for a major thrift store chain in a northern Seattle location that was considered by many to be sketchy. The MO of this chain was to buy up old grocery stores or other serviceable old buildings and open up stores. This building was, I believe, one of the old grocery stores of the area. It was tiny and very old. I had made a few friends while working there, most of whom I'm still friends with today, and recently this was brought back up. It blows my mind that I could have forgotten this, because it's the only actual tangible evidence I had ever seen with my own two eyes of real paranormal activity. So here's what went down. One night, after everybody went home, the security alarm went off. That flagged the security company to send a police car and to inform the building owners. So on and so forth, down the chain of command, until it landed at my friend, who was at the time the store supervisor. Since he lived within walking distance of the store, he was responsible for meeting with a patrol and verifying that the building was all clear, and it was. With that taken care of, everyone went on about their business. The next day, he obviously checked the security footage to see what might have set off the alarm. He actually called me and a few others into the office to show us the footage. Let me describe the layout for you a little bit so you can have a better mental image. The front of the store was an entire wall of floor-to-ceiling windows with 3 doors, an entrance, an exit, and an emergency exit with a big red handle that would trip the alarm if used. The registers stood between the front of the wall and the racks of clothing, with each crack having a little end cap sign on a little metal post. If you've thrift shopped before, I'm sure you would know what it looked like, as it's pretty much the same in all stores. The back part of the store, which was employee only, had a bunch of racks of clothes waiting to be priced that sat there for the next morning. So he shows us the CCTV footage. It's dark and empty, and nothing seems to be happening for a minute. Then, one of the end cap signs starts to slowly spin. This I could easily write off as a vent draft or something, but things started picking up. The CCTV would pan back and forth between the cameras, overlooking the front windows, registers, and partial view of the racks and the end cap signs, to the back of the house area where we processed all donations. In the back, you could see a sleeve of a coat being lifted, as though it was pinched at the cuff and lifted above the collar before being dropped again, over and over. That could not be explained by a draft. Back to the front camera. The sign is now spinning extremely fast, and the shitty cardboard signs they have hanging on fishing lines from the ceiling are swaying like crazy, almost like an earthquake. And then, the glass windows, they started actually flexing violently. The red handle on the emergency door, a long metal bar, almost as long as the actual door, at the front, thrusted up and down, while the whole door looked like they were being wailed on by somebody, or several somebodies. This is what set off the alarm. There was nobody there. The parking lot was visible through the glass, and there was not a single person there. All this activity started very slowly and ramped up into somewhat of a violent frenzy, and then just stopped. All within maybe a 1 or 2 minute span. So yeah, I have no proof, and that is frustrating, and can think of no logical explanation for any of it. I'm absolutely floored that I was able to forget that I was shown that video, even if it was a better part of a decade ago. Please someone, help us. We don't know what to do. It's getting so bad. It's been bad over the last 20 years, but this is the worst by far. Both of my parents grew up in haunted houses, and of course my siblings and I have all grown up in haunted houses as well. At first my parents thought my brother just had an imaginary friend. His name was Joe, and he lived in the closet. My brother woke up screaming in the middle of the night when I was a baby, so I don't remember. My parents ran in there, and he had blood all over his sheets, and 3 very long cuts on his back. They had bunk beds, and my brother was on the bottom. My parents said he was pale and wouldn't say a word. Things calmed down for a really long time, until I was 10. I had one of my friends stay over, and we were staying up really late, playing games, and doing what little girls do. We started hearing scratching sounds coming from outside my door. I had a cat, so I thought it was her. So I went to open the door, but there was nothing there. We ended up shrugging it off. Then it started again, and the doorknob started to jiggle, and it slowly opened. There was a dark figure standing there, looking at us. It was out of breath, and its shoulders were going up and down. Then it lunged at us, and we screamed, causing my parents to come in running. Nothing and nobody was in the house. My friend never stayed the night at my house again, and we stopped being friends shortly after. 9 years later, just little things were happening, nothing too scary. My boyfriend went off to basic training, and I still lived with my parents when I was 19. I had a dog, Zeus, who was sleeping on my bed, and he's a yellow lab. It was 6:30 in the morning, and I had to be up at 8:30 for work. He woke me up growling. Then I heard a weird voice in my ear speaking a language I didn't understand. When I started to open my eyes, it started growling in my ears. I opened my eyes fast, and my door slammed. My dog was standing over me, with his hair standing up, looking like he was about to attack someone. Everyone was already at work, and I heard banging coming from my parents' room. I got Zeus off of me, and jumped out of bed, and ran to my parents' room. The cabinets were opening and closing fast, and things were being thrown everywhere, around the room. It wouldn't stop. I turned around and went to run out, but the door slammed shut. My dog was running around the house, barking and growling, and started running into the door. I said screw it, and ran out and grabbed some work clothes, and got my dog and got the hell out. I dropped off my dog at my friend's house and went to work early. When I got home, my parents' room was destroyed. My mother was crying, and my dad was pissed. I told them everything, and we decided not to talk about it again, and went on with the rest of the night. My brother still lived with my parents as well. That night, his door kept opening and closing, and I kept hearing running in the hallway, so I thought it was him. I slipped on my slippers and stomped to his room. I was gonna yell at him to knock off his stupid shit, and when I opened the door, he was snoring. I woke him up and he promised me it wasn't him. He told me to leave his door open to see if anything happens again. I'm halfway down the hallway and my brother yells at me to run to my room and not to look back. But of course, I turn around instead. As I turned around, I see a large black figure standing in the doorway staring at me. It had large red eyes. I froze and started to whimper. My brother, being the protective big brother, came charging out of his room, telling the thing to leave me alone, and then it disappeared. My brother ran to me and led me to my room and slept on the floor all night. I didn't sleep. Now a year later, I'm 21. My husband is away in the army at the moment, and we are waiting for our plumbing to be done at our new house. Last night we had a bad rainstorm. I woke up to growling again and couldn't move. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure with red eyes just staring at me, and it opened its mouth so wide it could fit my whole head in its mouth. It had huge sharp teeth and a long skinny tongue. It screamed in my ear, and my ears started to ring. I wanted to cover them, but I couldn't. My parents come running into my room, covering their ears, but it stopped mid-run when they saw the thing. My dad came running to me and picked me up and carried me to his room, and Zeus followed. I was finally able to move and started shaking uncontrollably. My brother still lives there, as well as his girlfriend. We heard her scream, and then she started banging on the door, and then my dad opened it, and she came running in, crying and shaking. We all started to ask where my brother was. Before she could answer, he came out of his room on his hands and feet with black eyes, just staring at us. We all froze, none of us knew what to do. My brother then popped his neck and started running for us. My dad slammed his door shut and locked it. My brother ran right into it. My mom was screaming for it to get the hell out of the house and just kept repeating this while things were being thrown, then it goes quiet. My dad opens the door and my brother was passed out on the floor with his nose bleeding. When my brother woke up, we told him everything. He didn't remember a thing, but remembers hearing screaming, and then it all went black. Nobody slept last night, and we all called in and are trying to figure this out. Now it's the next night, and it's 11 o'clock. We are hearing growling and scratching through the entire house. We can't do this again. Please help. I will keep you updated as soon as I can. Thank you. I go to Florida every year to see my cousins. When we were a few weeks into our vacation, my cousins started saying when they were at my cousin Logan's and Kelsey's house that they would see this little boy in Kelsey's dark closet at night. So being skeptical, I asked if I could stay so I could see for myself. I went there the next night. We set everything up, and we were sitting in a dark room. They said I had to focus on the closet long enough to see it. At first I was confused because I didn't see anything, but then everyone realized that the doll on a swing in Kelsey's room, named Cricket, started rocking back and forth side to side, and that's a weird rocking pattern, and there was no draft. After that, I focused hard on the closet, then I saw it, and so did everyone else. A black shadow like a hand started reaching out from the closet, and it wrapped its fingers around the door. Then it disappeared and everyone stopped since they were so scared. I still to this day clearly remember the black, ghoulish hand. So I've never really talked about this, but it all started 3 years ago when I was talking to this girl for a little bit. Her name was Natalie. She lived in an older house and had the entire basement to herself. I remember her saying things like how her house was haunted. I didn't really believe her until this one night. So me and my friend Nick are spending the night at her house, and I remember my friend laying down on the couch at like 9:30, and he was just staring blankly at the wall. I didn't think anything was wrong, and I thought he was just messing around, so I started calling his name. Yo, Nick. 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 Nothing I said could get a response from him. Meanwhile, I was across the room, and Natalie was sitting on her bed. After about a minute of him just staring blankly, he jumps off the couch and says, "I don't mess with that. I don't mess with that." Freaking out, and Natalie started laughing. It didn't really dawn on me until later that I think she knew what was happening. Anyways, I started laughing too, thinking it was a joke. About 5 minutes pass, and he calms down and sits back on the couch. This is where things get a little creepy and interesting. She had a screen door in her room that opened outside. I specifically remember as soon as I took 2 steps out of her room, every single light in her room, including outlets, all blew out and it was pitch black. It got really creepy for a second. We tried everything, and the only thing in her room that would work was the lamp next to the couch, right next to Nick's head. Anyways, this was all kind of new to me, and I didn't really know what to think about the situation. I then remembered things getting weird in the room, like Natalie was getting super agitated over the littlest things and wouldn't let me sleep in her bed. So I was like, whatever, I'll just sleep on the floor at the foot of her bed. I remember I couldn't fall asleep that night. I was laying there for a while everyone else was asleep when I had this sleep paralysis type of feeling. I couldn't move or anything. I remember this happened to me once when I was young, and all I could think to do was to pray and start saying the Our Father prayer in my head. When about halfway through it, it stopped and I just tried to go back to bed. About 30 seconds pass and it hits me again that I can't move. This is giving me chills as I type this. So I start praying again, and halfway through the prayers it stops. At this point I was like, whatever this is gone, until about 30 seconds pass again, and this time it's much more frightening. I remember it felt like someone plunged me onto an outlet, like I was being shocked through my whole body, and I was kind of shaking or whatever. It was just holding me down. I remember trying to move my arms as hard as I could to rip the blanket off of Nick to wake him up and help me, but in my head I was saying Our Fathers, and it left halfway through again. At this point I was freaking out. I was literally scared for the next few months after this, and I slept in the same room as my mom for a month or so. It took me a while to kind of make sense of what happened that night, but I think some entity or demon or something, I don't know, tried messing with my friend Nick, and when I laughed and taunted it, it targeted me. But this story is not over. So this happened about 2 years ago when I moved into my new house, which I still live in today. I remember my aunt was visiting, and it was late night, around 2 a.m. I was just chilling, playing video games, doing my thing when I hear a weird sound to my left and right. I had my gaming headset on, so I ignored it and kept playing. When I thought I heard the same sound for the second time from behind my bed, I took my headset off and waited, trying to hear it again to find out what it was. I sat there for like 2 minutes, just waiting, when I heard the sound right next to me. Woo. It's literally all I could make out, and it was just weird and creeped me the fuck out. So I ran to my mom's room and told her something was making sounds in my room, and she was like, oh, it's probably the sprinkler system or some other shit outside, and went outside to look. I remember I walked back into the hall to my room and stood there waiting for my mom to come back inside, when I literally heard the loudest woo in my ear. I ran out of the house crying and freaking out, and my mom thought I was crazy. I remember hearing a voice another time while I was trying to sleep, and I just kept telling it to go away. Since then I haven't heard any other crazy shit, though I do get sleep paralysis sometimes. The most recent experience, I had what was like a presence of a woman in my room, and I couldn't move. I don't know, all this stuff is just kind of creepy to me. So a couple days ago, my boyfriend and I were driving up this road that was in the middle of the woods. As we turned the corner, we first see a deer. The deer didn't even flinch at our car coming up the road, which was weird. Then we saw it. Now, I'm not normally a person that scares easily, but seeing this thing made me piss myself. It looked as if it was talking to the deer. It had to be at least 8 feet tall, very thin, and it was all black with wings. It flew up right in front of the car, and my boyfriend slammed on the brakes, turns to me and says, "Tell me you saw that," and asked me to describe it to him to make sure he wasn't going crazy. I did, and we sped all the way home. This happened in about a minute, although it felt a lot longer. I was telling my dad about it, and he said he saw the same exact creature years earlier at my sister's bus stop. He tried to convince my sister it was this a garbage bag or something, and my sister's response was, "Daddy, that thing was too fast and too big to be a trash bag." And all my dad could say was, "I don't know." If anyone has any idea what this could be, I would like to know. I'm very skeptical about all of this, and I'm looking for a more logical explanation. I'm a male that's 13 years old, and I was 13 when this event happened. So anyways, I was asleep around 2 or 3 in the morning, and I heard some laughter coming from my basement. I thought it was my dad playing a joke on me. So in the morning, before he left, I asked him if he had been laughing at 3 a.m. in the morning. I know it was a weird question, but I asked him anyways. He told me no, and asked me what it sounded like. I told him it sounded exactly like his voice, but more hysterical and deeper. He just gave me a weird look and said I was probably having sleep paralysis. If you're familiar with that, you know that you can't move. And the thing is, I was fully mobile, meaning it wasn't sleep paralysis, and it was real. It all starts with my parents very sick in the hospital for completely unrelated reasons to the story. During that time, my mom's uncle, I will call him Bill for now, lived in a house in a smaller neighborhood, but a good one. He was basically a kid in an adult's body. He was happy and joyful as anyone could ever be. While my parents were sick, Bill was in his house after struggling with cancer and an incident of carbon monoxide poisoning. He knew he was going to pass soon, but was waiting for my mom to get back from the hospital to know that she would be okay. She got there and found him in bed waiting for her, very weak. She told him that she was okay, and that's all he needed to hear before passing on. After that, many years passed. My parents got the house from him, and after a while, they had me and my brother. While we still lived there, many oddities occurred very frequently, like things falling and not being able to find out what caused it. But the odd part is, it almost seemed playful and never harmful to anyone. Some of the time, we would be in the room alone, commonly in the basement, and you could almost feel like there was someone there. But it wasn't scary, it almost seemed like it was giving a feeling of home. The reason I'm conflicted on this scenario is because when we moved to our new house, none of this occurred. Was it a ghost? I'm not even sure. This is a story about when I used to live in Thailand. I'm pretty young, and this scared me a lot. It all started when my parents took us on vacation to the beach. They got a pretty cheap hotel, 3 minutes walking from the beach. The first night it was nice, except when I heard a kid shout and woke me up. I thought it was from the hotel, but it was 2 a.m. and they should be sleeping. It was sharp screams, really sharp. I got a bit scared, but didn't have the balls to wake up my parents, which were sleeping in the next room. I ended up just falling back asleep. When I woke up, I couldn't find my phone, and the lamp I had left on turned off by itself. I asked my sister if she did it, and she said she didn't. I was really skeptical about that. I ended up having some fun, so I forgot about it. But that night I heard a kid crying, saying, "Don't do it, please." I got the hell up and woke up my sister, but she slapped me and said, "Go back to sleep, dumbass." So that's what I did. But on that same night I woke up to what I think was a shadow of a kid saying, "Help me, he's coming." At that point, some people might have said I was hallucinating, but I wasn't. It was pure reality. Dumb me didn't say anything. The next day, we meet a Belgian man who lived in the hotel. In a sarcastic way, he said, "Did you sleep well?" My mom didn't get it, but I did. The last night, before we went back, I was asleep and woke up to see a freaking gardener. He was old. When I got back, the weird guy I am, I spent 9 hours on the PC digging into this, and what I found was terrifying. Where I was sleeping was the house of Thailand's most notorious murderer. I jumped from my computer. What I found was a Chinese man that immigrated to Thailand for work as a farmer, but what they didn't know was that he would kidnap children and eat their livers. Now it all made sense. I am a female. It was a Thursday and I had my alarm set for 6 a.m. because I had school. I woke up to my alarm blasting in my ear. I grabbed my phone and turned off the alarm. I was awake and was glued to my bed, so I decided to go onto Instagram. That's when I saw it, someone standing 1 foot away from me. My vision was a bit blurry, but I could see that she was wearing a nightgown with flowers and she had long hair. Her legs were so pale. She went in front of my brother's bed, moving side to side gently, looking at me. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I went under my covers and started rubbing my eyes and accidentally scratched myself. That's when I realized I wasn't dreaming. I pulled the covers off and she was still there. All I could do was call my brother's name. For my brother's privacy, I'll just call him Jack. I whispered while crying, "Jack, use your flashlight." I said this about 5 times while crying louder. He heard me on the 5th time and woke up and grabbed his flashlight. That's when she vanished and my dog woke up. I was still scared and crying as I told my brother what happened. I got up and still went to school. When I got home later that day, I told my mom, and what she said still chills me to the bone. She said that a woman had died in her house and used to live there alone with her son. When she died, her son moved away, and that's when my mom rented the house. I am no longer comfortable being in this house. Now this isn't a scary story, but more of a creepy one. My friend's dad's family used to live in the woods near Eureka Springs, Arkansas. My friend's uncle was the oldest of the 3 kids and was allowed to explore the woods on his own, even though he was only about 9 at the time. One day he came across a little cottage nestled in the woods. He knocked on the door and was greeted by 2 old ladies. He promptly asked for some water as he had been exploring for a few hours. The ladies invited him in and gave him some milk and cookies and sat him down and talked to him for a while he was petting their white cat. They talked for a while and eventually invited him to stay for dinner and spend the night because it was getting dark and he was ways away from home. His parents were pretty used to him being in the woods for nights without coming back, so they accepted it without question. He spent the night without incident and returned home the next morning. He would visit them many more times over the next year, and one day they told him to bring his parents and his brothers next time he came. So the next week, the whole family embarked on a long trek to the cottage. When they arrived, however, they found the remains of a small cottage that appeared to be abandoned for years. Everyone was confused, as they all trusted that my friend's uncle had visited these women many times. They had absolutely no idea what happened, or if my uncle had actually been visiting anybody. To make things weirder, as they were leaving, an old skinny white cat ran past them, darting into the trees, leaving them in utter shock. In 2006 or 7, when I was around 8 or 9 years old, I experienced something quite strange. I had never seen anything that could be considered creepy at my house, but one night I certainly did. It was around midnight when I happened to wake up. This was pretty common in a lot of people, so I thought nothing of it, and was just getting ready to go back to sleep. As usual, my bedroom door was open with a hallway light turned on, and that's when I saw it. An abnormally tall, dark, faceless black figure in the corner of my room. It was looking down at me, staying quiet and still the entire time. I didn't really know what to think. Oddly enough, I didn't feel scared. I was just merely wondering, what is this thing? The tall figure continued to stand there, still staring at me. I knew I wasn't experiencing sleep paralysis because I was able to move, yet this seemed far too real to be a dream. I decided to slowly turn around and face the wall instead. I covered myself with blankets and closed my eyes. I don't know what the tall figure did after that, if it had even left or not. The next thing I knew, it was morning. I decided against telling my parents about what I had seen. They were pretty hardcore Christians, and I honestly didn't want to freak them out. Yet, I did eventually decide to tell at least my mother about it. She luckily didn't freak out. Instead, she told me that she too had seen something very similar, if not the same figure. Except her encounter was quite different and much more disturbing from mine. According to my mother's account, the tall figure also approached her in the middle of the night. My father remained asleep next to her. Suddenly, the tall figure lunged itself at my mother and began to choke her. She was able to repent it in the name of Jesus a couple of times. When the dark figure finally backed away and disappeared, it was only then that my father woke up, but he still had no idea what just happened. My mother told me the reason why I had not been attacked was supposedly demons, as she thought this figure was. Do not attack children. Personally, I see it as a bad omen. Some terrible things have happened to me over the years after the appearance of the dark figure, but I have since recovered and have a lot of support. I'm 21 years old now and still live in that same house, yet I have never experienced anything like this ever since. I can only wonder what the tall figure was thinking as it stared at me on that night. When I was younger in the 60s, we lived in an old house built before the Civil War. It was up in Oldham County, Kentucky, in an area known as the Devil's Backbone, on Dawkins Road. I was around 12 years old and had an encounter I would never forget. One night, I was unable to sleep and I was laying on my side when I got this very uncomfortable feeling. I turned on my back and saw a young man with dark hair and a mustache staring at me from the foot of my bed. He was wearing clothing from the 1800s. I looked at him for a while before I lost my nerve and ducked under the covers. When I looked back up, he was gone. Several weeks later, I was upstairs in my brother's room and I was home alone. Suddenly, someone loudly ran up the stairs to the door. I opened it only to find a cold breeze. I left the house until everyone else came home. Sometime later, I was in town with my dad. We met an old man that said he lived in the house when he was a boy. He said the house was haunted and that a young musician hung himself from the second-story window, which was my brother's room. This happened to me when I was 14. Me and my family were camping in Crystal Lake, Azusa, California. We took off that day, so when we got there we could swim the lake, but of course we were delayed by traffic, so we didn't arrive until it was getting dark. Once we got there, we unpacked and finished settling in, and we wanted to light a fire and make s'mores. Unfortunately, there was no firewood because we forgot, so me and my cousin, being the adventurous teens that we were, decided to grab a flashlight and go seek for dry wood. My older brother asked if he can come with us, but we refused because we were trying to be independent. We walked down a forest path for about 5 minutes, not far enough to get lost. We found a spot where there was a whole lot of wood, almost like someone was collecting a pile and just left it there. But we had forgot a sack to put the wood in. I told my cousin that I would go back to get the sack from the van, and I'd be right back. I had an iPod, so I let him borrow it so he would be entertained while I grabbed the sack. It was a creepy walk through the forest alone, so I decided to run. After I grabbed the sack, halfway going back, I hear my cousin scream. I sprint towards him. When I get there, he had his head between his knees and was sobbing softly. I thought he was trying to pull a prank, but after asking him what happened, he put his hands on his mouth and pointed with his other hand. When I looked up towards the direction that he pointed to, I saw what I could only describe as pure terror. A lady in a bloody bride's dress floating, just staring at us. She never moved, just stared. She didn't have any eyeballs, just a weird glow to her. But I stared at her, and it finally clicked. What the fuck am I still doing here? I grabbed my cousin and pulled him up. I never ran faster in my life. When I got to the rest of the family, they told me that they heard a lady sobbing in the far distance, but we never heard anything. I explained what happened to us, and they saw the terror in our eyes to know that we were serious. I had a rough time sleeping, and we never did get any s'mores. Okay, so let's get this straight. I'm a 15-year-old girl who lives in New Zealand. Back when this took place, I was around 12 years old. In 2016, a couple days before Christmas, the worst thing happened to us. We found out that my auntie died, which is on my dad's side of the family, and they were very close. She was a jockey and fell off her horse, and it crushed her. Her favorite thing was to smell lilies. This will be useful later. Anyway, after about 2 years after her death, we visited her grave again for Christmas, and have been here to see her many times, but this time felt different in a way. The air was heavy, and I got a wave of dread. It was so overwhelming that I had to stay in the car for a bit. Once I thought the bad feeling had calmed down, I decided to hop out and look around the cemetery. As I was doing so, I smelled a familiar smell, like the smell of lilies, and at first it was comforting in a way, but then I felt like I was being watched, but like whatever was watching me didn't want me to be there. So I listened to my gut feeling and booked it back to the rest of my family. Not shortly after, once all of us were in the car driving back, we saw that there was something in the middle of the road. So we stopped, but the longer we stared at it, the more we realized it was my auntie, and she looked worried. And about 2 seconds later, a car comes flying by in full speed, and then she disappears. I'll tell you now that it scares me, and I couldn't sleep that night. But the longer I thought about it, I realized that she saved us that day, and she was looking out for us. We would have got hit by that car. This happened around 8 years ago. I was probably 7 or 8. I just moved to Ecorse, Michigan with my grandmother. It was me, my 2 sisters, and my grandmother living there. Both sisters are older and braver than I am. I remember us 3 sleeping on a futon in the living room, and my grandmother had just bought a nightlight for the next room so I wouldn't be scared. But every night it just didn't seem to work. I remember not being able to sleep one night and just staring at the ceiling. Then from the corner of my eye, I see my nightlight go on, but it wasn't like it just turned on. It was like someone moved from standing in front of it. I tapped my older sister to wake her up, and she witnessed it all as well. We waited until the morning to tell my grandmother, but of course she didn't believe us. Fast forward 2 months, my favorite cousin came to visit me and one of my sisters. We were playing in the backyard with sticks and branches. My cousin was obsessed with Resident Evil at the time, so he was hitting plants with the stick, calling the game, chop off the heads. At one point we were in the back left of the yard, and my cousin finds this box. It's a pretty long box. I was somewhat of a tall kid, and if I were to crouch a little, I could fit in it. My cousin joked that it was a coffin, and since I was a kid, I believed him. But we all forgot about it later. Fast forward 2 months, we're moving out. Grandma said that she found a better place, but somehow I knew that this place just gave her the creeps. Once me and my sister moved most of our things to the new house, we just stayed there to settle in. My grandma went back to the old house to say a prayer. I don't know why, but she's always been one to do that. She returned to the new house and pulled my older sister aside and told her something, with an unsettling look on her face. I wasn't told till recently what they were talking about. My grandma said that when she was saying a prayer, she happened to open her eyes and saw a little girl. My grandma's eyes were filled with tears as she said it. She continued with telling me that she called the house owner a few days later, and he told her that he was desperate to get someone into the house because he was losing money, so he just didn't tell her the background of it. Turns out, The last two people that lived there were a father and his daughter. For some unknown reason, the father murdered the daughter in the room, then hid her in the far back of the closet. I never told her about that coffin-like box that me and my cousins found, but I still wonder if it was her in that box. I'm a water treatment plant operator. Been doing this for about a decade. I've been the night shift guy my whole career. The nights are normally quiet and can be boring if everything is going as planned. My plant has a few different buildings. The oldest is 60 or so years old. The main building is where I spend the majority of my night shifts, and is only roughly 20 years old. For more backstory of the area, this used to be a booming, energized area. This area was littered with railroad tracks and drifters coming and going on the trains. Our farms and factories were very bountiful back then. Now that you all understand that with success in the area, there's also a darkness. From the settling of the area, wars with natives, and even into the 30s and 40s of people being killed on train wrecks and bad business deals, the grounds are laced with darkness. The silence of night shifts can be eerie all on its own. Lots of bumps and bangs in the dim lit darkness. On the night that I'm about to speak about, everything started as normal. I came around sunset, got the nightly Passover, and began my work. Around midnight, I had to do my rounds around the whole property while getting the nightly pump numbers. I made my rounds with nothing but a flashlight around the main building. The oldest building is a good walking distance away from the main building. I set out in the darkness, heading for that building. I must also add that we aren't in the nicest area of the town. However, I'm a big guy and I can hold my own. As I made my walk, I got an uneasy feeling. I've gotten this before, but I have a job to do and nothing came of it. I rounded the corner and unlocked the door. As I did this, the hairs on my back and neck stood up. Again, I have a job to do though. I opened the door and there stood nothing. I walked in and proceeded to get my numbers. As I turned to shut the door, I looked down the hallway to see a woman in pure white looking at me through the other door. I almost jumped out of my boots and pissed myself a little. As I came back to reality, I once again made eye contact with this entity. As soon as I met her gaze, everything in me said, "Hey, your life is in danger, buddy." Her face was distorted and started to shift around. I was now frozen as she shifted into what looked like an Indian warrior. His eyes were glowing. As I got to my feet, he shifted into a huge wolf creature. The growls were chilling to say the least. It snarled, then ran towards me. I didn't even have time to shut the door. I ran as fast as I could, screaming bloody murder. I felt as if it was trying to bite my backside. It got a hold of my pant leg and tore it to shreds. I stumbled and rolled, but somehow managed to get back on my feet. I darted to the main building, and as I shut the door, I heard a loud thud on the other side. I locked the doors and cowered inside. I could hear the thing growling and scratching at the walls. I got the courage to look out the window, just to end up face to face with a white lady again. I called the police and had them sit with me until the sun came up. No one else has ever seen the white lady since. It's still quite freaky, but I had a job to do. This happened just yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. I'm not quite sure what to think about it because it's just so bizarre and unbelievable. I might have just been too sleep deprived. So last night, maybe at 11 p.m., I was walking around my block. My town is relatively safe, so I didn't feel any danger. Plus it was pretty at night. I had been walking around for maybe 5 minutes when a pale woman with blonde hair and a white dress caught my eye from across the street. She was about my height and looked to be around my age too. I didn't actually pay attention to her after I first noticed her. While I circled the block again, she was on the same street, a couple feet in front of me. She was standing on the curb, staring at cars passing by. It was a main road, so even that late, people were still driving on it. I said hello to her, and she turned and gazed at me. I couldn't see her face super well, but from what I think I saw, she had no pupils or color in her eyes, and she just stared at me. After a while, I asked if she was okay. She didn't respond again, and simply pointed to the road. I was really confused and didn't understand. Right as a red car started coming down the street, she stepped onto the road. The car slammed into her, and it was a bloody mess. The driver immediately stopped and jumped out. It was a man in his mid-20s. We both spoke about it, freaking out. He called the police, and I went around the car to see the state of the girl. Once I circled around the car, she was gone. Not gone as in dead. Gone as that she wasn't even there. The blood was gone too, but not gone from his car. After the police arrived, they concluded that it was some big hoax from a kid who didn't know what they were talking about, and some guy just went along with it. The blood on his truck was investigated and found to be paint. I'm still not sure what happened was real. It felt so real, but I don't believe in the paranormal. I don't know what it was, if it was just a dream or if it was real. I remember it like it was real. I feel like I can't leave my house now. I don't understand anything, and I kind of feel like I'm going crazy. Has anyone else experienced something like this? I hope you will seek kindness in retort of my words through the ordeal that has taken me over 6 years to pull the plug and say fuck this shit. First off, let me introduce myself. I am M. I graduated top of my class back in the day and have striven for perfection in everything I do. Yes, I'm an asshole, and I'm an internet troll as well. But when it comes to the life of another human, I have always put myself before others, which basically the number one rule of EMS is scene safety, i.e., you go home before them. I'm clearly not right in the head going into this profession, and I don't think anyone truly is when you've seen what I've seen. I originally got into this profession strictly as a scapegoat for the apocalypse, so to speak, to at least have a certain skill that would make me an asset to whatever community or gang I come across when shit hits the fan. But once I started studying medicine and learning just why people develop symptoms the way they do in common origins, it just intrigued me. Healthcare is literally a Rubik's Cube. Someone comes up with a combination of I am fucked, and you have to figure out the solution. Well, at least on the ambulance, we just had to intubate, IO or IV, and pump some chest if needed. There is no greater feeling than stuffing a nasal down someone that is drunk, faking a heart attack, seizure, or being unresponsive. They can pretend all they want, but when you have a 4-inch tube forced up your nose, they will tend to quit faking and wake up immediately. And that was where I came in. My specialty was calling bullshit on most people. My personal favorite was asking someone mid-seizure if they were having one, and they would reply yes, while twitching and throwing their arms. Yeah, get the hell out of my ambulance. In reality, an ambulance is nothing more than a great white taxi, also known as a ride to the ER, unless we call bullshit and send your ass back to triage in the front. We have slick jackasses here as well, that sit in the ER for hours and impatiently walk or drive up a block or two, then call 911 for chest pains, then are stupid enough to tell us that they waited too long in the ER. Yeah, back to triage, and it added $2,000 to your bill, idiot. We are a level 2 trauma center, and that means the real shit we come across goes straight to the metro halfway down or up the map. I live in a city with a population of 30,000, 100,000 workforce during the day, and 80% of our nights are mostly routine, taking me mob back to the nursing home or transporting to dialysis. But once in the blue moon or so, we get called to some actual grit your teeth trauma shit. You know, the entire reason we went to school in the first place. I kid you not, we get our fair share of bullshit calls like Medic 31, response code 3 to 456 Fucktard Drive for a possible Sasquatch attack. Dude was drunk, methed out, and got bitten by his dog. Or Medic 52, respond to 123 Hillbilly Lane for a possible demon possession. A 16-year-old female drunk and high came in after her curfew with Catholic parents. So as you see, we always get a form of entertainment each night, just in different ways. I even got a call out for SWAT because a woman couldn't open her tub of cream. No kidding, the RX cream where you have to unscrew and flip and screw back in with a punctured top. One run that stuck with me for a long time still to this day, that I cannot, nor anyone else can explain this, and everyone in the station thought I was bullshit until the local channel broadcasted the story the next day. We responded to this call one night, at 3 a.m. Medic 32, we have a code 3, MVC requesting assistance at the top right corner of Highway 91 and 420. Multiple fatalities and a possible airlift. We need you for backup to assess and assist. Right on, was the first response out of me. I clearly didn't know what I was about to get into. After about a 10-minute drive with the lights and sirens on, we get to the scene. Emergency responders and fire were already there, as was the primary ambulance in the county that we were dispatched to, about 20 miles away. Yes, I drove 90 to 100 in a 50. The initial scenario was a drunk driver crossed the highway instead of turning on his side, then drove into oncoming traffic. A family of 3 was coming down the other lane, opposite of him. They were both driving in excess of 70 miles per hour each and collided head-on with each other. The drunk driver, not wearing a seatbelt, was immediately ejected through the windshield and killed instantly. His eyes were open and a smile on his face, on the pavement. The other vehicle, the driver was killed instantly by the airbag with her seatbelt on. It broke her neck. The front passenger died from blunt force trauma to the head for not wearing a seatbelt and slamming his head on the dash, pretty much turning into a smashed tomato. The backseat guy, brother of the driver, we actually had an air vac with several contusions and lacerations. He had a degloving of the forehead and was basically scalped. Every time he wiggled his eyebrow, the skin would open more and you could see his skull. So after my initial assessment, I was gathering some info. I heard a very shallow and tart plea, "Help me." So after we extracted the dead female, the only one actually wearing a seatbelt, which it was obviously she died from a broken neck, hitting the airbag so hard, or the whiplash afterwards, because airbags kill you deader than shit. I turned my ears to the sound of the plea. It was coming from the back seat. While the EMRs were bagging and tagging the female, I investigated. It was a little girl, maybe 8 years old, laying on the floorboards of the vehicle. Apparently, she wasn't wearing a seatbelt and was reaching down for a Bible right before they ran into each other. So I thought, "Mister, can you help me? I'm stuck." "Honey, we are doing the best we can right now. You have been in something very bad, and we are trying to work things out." "Is that your daddy up there in the front?" "No, that's Larry, Mommy's husband. He's my stepfather. Daddy is in the swimming pool." "Okay, baby, we are gonna get you what you need to get out. Are you hurting anywhere?" "Yes, sir, my arm and my bottom, and I can't really breathe." She then started to cry. "Okay, sugar, I need you to calm down for me right now. We are gonna get you out, but can you tell me your name and the last game you played today?" This was an awareness check. "Yes, my name is Gina. We played hide and seek today. I hid in the swimming pool and Daddy found me." "Okay, sweetie, we're gonna take you to the hospital to get you checked out." "Is that your mommy in front?" "Yes." "Is she still here?" "She is still here, but I need you to stay calm, okay?" "Okay, I guess I'll see her later then." "Okay, Peanut, I'm gonna try to get you some help, and we're gonna get something to put around your neck so it doesn't get hurt anymore." "Okay, thank you, mister. I will see you soon." At that moment, I frantically ran to the ambulance and the EMRs, yelling, "Oh my fucking god, there's a little girl on the floorboards of the back seat that we missed. I need a C-spine now." They looked at me like I was stupid. "Dude, you gotta come. I need help, now." My partner quietly told me, "Dude, there were only 3 people in the vehicle. It's been cleared. Fucking chill." "Bullshit, I just talked to her. She's laying on the floorboards." "Bro, you've been up too long, man. Get in the bus and let us handle the rest. I got this." "But there was a fucking girl. Let us handle this." So I got back in and ended up transporting. The third person that was gonna fly died from severe trauma and blood loss. And the very next day, the local news reported that an 8-year-old girl named Gina drowned in her backyard swimming pool. Her father also passed away when he found her and dove in to save her, but he got sucked into the bottom drain and drowned as well. To this day, I do not know what happened with this. Apparently, the family in the car were speeding to get to their daughter after they found out. The one thing that jacked me up the most about this is she said, "I will see you soon." Growing up in central US, I've heard all the myths and legends about skinwalkers. I never really gave them any merit up until last week. I also heard that talking about them or thinking about them can draw them. But I need to tell someone, anyone that would listen and not think that I'm crazy. Let me start with some background. My name is Dakota. I am 26 and have grown up in and around the Southern Rockies and the Superstition Mountains. All my life I've been drawn to the outdoors. Hiking, camping, biking, rafting, kayaking, you name it, I've done it. I'm very experienced in all these activities and have worked as a guide and a survival instructor since the age of 19. I've experienced many strange and possibly paranormal things during my time in the wild, but I'm rambling. Anyway, last Friday I took some time off for myself just to get back in tune with the solitude of nature. I packed all my gear, finished going through my checklist, and made sure to let some other guides know where I was headed to and that I would be back a few days later. I loaded my gear into my four-wheeler, made sure that Bear, my very large, very loyal, very protective German Shepherd, was comfy in the passenger seat. He is my lookout, adventure partner, and best friend. He never leaves my side, even to the point that all the small businesses around the long-forgotten mining town I call home welcome him happily. We set out shortly after 11 a.m. towards a canyon I recently discovered hidden away behind thick brush and an apparent rock slide. After about 5 hours driving through the dusty and desolate landscape, the trail continues on between a narrow passage through the mountainous cliffs. When we arrived, I parked the four-wheeler behind a large outcropping of boulders, took the keys, and covered it up. Not that I was worried about theft. I was probably miles away from the nearest human. I covered it up to keep it out of the unforgiving sun and to prevent any melting damage. After getting my four-wheeler stashed away, I drawn my pack and my sidearm, which was a large caliber Desert Eagle. There weren't many animals out here, but I like guns and target shooting, so who cares if it's overkill? It's the last means of protection, and it will do the job. I surveyed the area. There was thick brush and dry foliage all around us, with a small foot trail I cleared from the four-wheeler at the rear, and a large rock pile in front of us, with sheer cliffs on either side. I skirted around the rocks to a very narrow passage, in behind on the left side. It was a tight squeeze, and I had to remove my pack and pull it behind me. I had to side shuffle like this for about 20 feet, with cold jagged rocks against my chest and loose boulders against my back. The trail narrowed near the end, and I had to suck in my chest and wiggle my way out into the larger opening in the rocks, with Bear waiting happily for me, with his head cocked to the side, with a confused look on his face, almost wondering why I was struggling when he passed so easily. When I finally freed myself from the narrow crevice, I looked around and my jaw dropped. All around me the cliff walls were covered with ancient cave paintings and carvings, some of which I recognized from some of the other Native American sites used as religious sites, but many of the symbols were new to me. The most notable was a large painting near where the trail continued on. It depicted a large figure whose head and antlers resembled that of a deer, but body was long and narrow. And strangest of all, it's at times like this that I wish that I brought some piece of technology, such as a camera or iPhone, but I usually leave them at home and only bring an emergency sat phone. Intrigued, I left the opening and headed down the trail. I was surprised by the steep downward slope that seemed to be heading down further and further into the earth, and I was even more surprised when the trail ended at the mouth of a large cave, a cave I didn't know about. This couldn't get any better. I set down my pack and pulled out my flashlight. It was getting pretty dark, so I figured I'd just check out the opening and then get settled in for the night. I wandered in a few feet and abruptly stopped when the floor dropped down into a chasm. My flashlight barely penetrated the dark abyss below me. Disappointed that I needed to return another day with my cave gear and possibly another partner, I headed back towards the mouth of the cave and Bear, who strangely stayed put and did not follow me in. He must have got tired, I thought, as I suddenly started to realize my own fatigue after 5 hours of driving and nearly 4 hours of hiking. I started a small fire with some light newspaper logs, in which burned surprisingly for a long time, heated up some water for a dehydrated omelet, and gave Bear his bag of kibble. After a not quite so satisfying meal, I unrolled my sleeping bag and got comfortable, with a fire by my side, and a decent view of the stars peeking between the distant cliff tops that sheltered me from the rest of the world. With a peaceful thought, I dozed off to the sound of the crackling fire and Bear snoring beside me. I sleepily checked my watch when I was nudged awake. It was almost 3 a.m. in the morning. I softly pushed Bear's head away from nudging me so I could go back to sleep. But that's when, in the dim firelight, I saw his teeth and his head low beside me, in a very protective position. He was staring towards the mouth of the cave with a deep guttural growl emanating from his throat. More alert now, I clumsily grabbed for my flashlight and unholstered my pistol, my fingers ready to switch off the safety. I motioned to Bear to be quiet, which was a very handy skill that had taken him a long time to learn. On command, he quieted, but still snarled, staring at the dark hole in the cliff. I illuminated the edge of the drop-off, my gun aimed with a beam, and we listened. For a few minutes, all I heard was silence besides my heartbeat. Then, faintly I heard it. I still can't describe it, but I will try my best. It sounded like the bleat of a goat and the sound of a wildcat coming together to form words that seemed so broken and foreign. Quiet at first, it was accompanied by crackling and scraping sounds, getting closer and closer. I strained my eyes to see the edge of the beam of light. What I saw next, I'm sure will be burned into my mind, and I will never forget it. In the light, long rotten fingers with thick black claws curled around the lip and proceeded to pull something up and over into the cave. This thing pulled itself to standing. It was about 6 feet tall, with long like deer legs, too skinny to support it, and it ended with small hooves that seemed to float above the ground. The body looked semi-human, but a skeleton draped with rotting, stinking flesh, with patches of mangled fur and ribs protruding from the chest. The smell was rancid, and I wanted to look away, to vomit, and to run, but I was paralyzed with fear, and I kept staring at the long curled antlers and the warped, twisted body. Long arms hanging loosely in front, with claws scraping the ground, but mostly the disturbing contoured mix of human and animal intertwined to make a face so haunting. I will remember it vividly on my dying day, I'm sure of it, and when it locked onto my view with its empty rotten sockets, it met my eyes, then I heard it, quietly but all around me, the hard howl of mangled words, "Let me help you." With that, I snapped out of my paralyzed state, switched off my safety, and pulled the trigger. Once, twice, 3 times from only 3 feet away. In an instant, the horrible thing before me flickered and was 2 feet away to the right. I fired again and again as this thing twitched and jerked towards me, in a terrifying nightmare coming to consume my very being. I don't remember much of what happened next. Bear was barking, us sprinting, flashlights and gunfire at the jerking and crackling. The putrid breath on my neck and the voice, that evil voice echoing around me. Let me help you. I remember the peak of sunlight, the roar of the side-by-side as me and Bear sped through the desert. We woke up in our shack uninjured, but forever scared by our experience. It keeps me awake every night since, and I need to tell somebody, to warn somebody. Please, if you see the carving of this thing, or an unknown cave, please don't enter.